Hello, Leapers, and welcome back to the Quantum Leap podcast. I'm Christopher DeFilippis, and today I am thrilled to bring you our interview with Cullen Douglas. Cullen, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Well, Leapers out there probably recognize you after the episode Secret History. You played Dr. Cullen Donovan. Secret Nazi spoilers.
Big spoiler.
Right.
Big spoiler.
Big spoiler. So, Cullen, I was looking at your background, and I'm just astounded at the career that you've had and so much that you've done. And I mean, you're a writer, you're a producer, you're a director, you're an actor. Can you just give us a brief overview of your background, how you got into acting, and then maybe we can work it up into getting the role on Quantum Leap?
Sure, of course. So I am, I guess, the quintessential journeyman actor. I'm kind of one of those guys that stands behind you at the grocery store and you keep looking over your shoulder going, did we go to high school together? Did you teach my daughter in school? It's always that kind of recognition, but people can't exactly place it. And I've been very fortunate over the last 30 some odd years to work as an actor and as a writer and as a director, and now as a producer as well. I got into the business. My family moved around a lot, and it was very hard to make friends. And so my mom said, well, let's put him in children's community theater and see if he might be able to thrive there, because I wasn't exactly thriving on the sports field. And but I found my people. And I was bitten by the bug, so to speak. And so did all the plays all through grade school and high school, and then went off to New York to study, and then to Florida to study, and then spent a lot of years doing bus and truck companies all over the United States. My little, Wikipedia trivia, I guess, is the fact that I have been fortunate enough to perform either on a stage or on a sound stage in 49 of the 50 states.
Which one are you missing?
Alaska.
Ah.
I am waiting for Alaska. My dear friend Jeff Perry of Steppenwolf Theater fame, last year he was working on the show Alaska Daily up there in Alaska, and I was like, okay, we've got to get me up on the show just so I can check it off my bucket list. And so anyway, I spent a lot of years doing theater and then started to transition into television and film. And like I said, I have been very fortunate over the years, recurring on shows, everything from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to I was very fortunate to be a part of David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return. And I also worked on Jason Kadam's show for CBS called Pure Genius. And then, of course, I was so fortunate that the fates kind of smiled down on me, and I got the audition to go in for Quantum Leap for this amazing role of Dr. Cullen Donovan. Mm-hmm. And you and I were speaking before we started the podcast tonight. I have to say, this podcast truly, I think, in some small way, helped me book the role.
Do tell.
Well, it's a situation that, I'd like to think that every actor out there is doing their homework, and I try to familiarize myself with most of the shows that I might be going in for, that I might be reading. And so I, of course, was a fan of the original incarnation of Quantum Leap, and I had watched some of the episodes of the current, reboot of the show and really enjoyed it, and just tried to find the time and discover it again. And when the audition came in, I felt like, okay, I need to do a deep dive as quickly as I can. And so, of course, I ran over to IMDb just to kind of get a lay of the land, maybe look at the colors in the wardrobe, so I knew what I would want to be able to suggest with, when I went for my audition. But I just felt the sense that I wanted to get an idea of the tone of the show and of the people. And so I went to YouTube literally and typed in Quantum Leap, and the first thing that popped up was the podcast. And so I spent that evening watching, you and Matt and some of the other folks talking about the show, I felt like I knew Ray when I went on to set because I had already seen him on the podcast, kind of a thing. So it really was, it served me so well as an actor to kind of fill in the blanks because often you just get your sides or you get a portion of the script and you don't know the lay of the land. But the podcast, it filled in all those blanks for me.
Well, thank you. That's very humbling because I know we work hard on the show and we're such super fans that for us the reward is just, we get to talk about Quantum Leap every week, and we were talking about the Legacy series for years, and then we were blessed with the Revival series. So it's amazing for us as podcasters to be sort of on the vanguard of a property that was moribund for quite a while. And now it's going as strong as ever. And we're getting to actually talk to actors who were just on set, a couple of months ago instead of 30 years ago. And you being a prime example. So,
Sure.
yeah, it's an amazing journey that we've been on. And I'm just so happy that the work that we put in was of value to you, because I can't imagine man, we ramble on for hours, dude. I mean, good. I'm hoping that you went 4 times speed at least through some of
No, no, no.
my screens.
No, it was really informative in the way in which you guys talked about the show because you were coming at it from a different point of view. You were coming at it from the viewer's point of view. I could have read all the stats, I could have done all that, but the way in which you guys talked about it, you really lent itself to talking about the tone, which I think what they have done with the series is just amazing because it really bridges so many different gaps. Yes, it's about the time travel and the leaping, but there's also this love story, which is amazing, that kind of keeps percolating. And then you have the backdrop of some of these really profound issues that they address in these episodes. And so it kind of, again, it just sort of checks off so many boxes, but I was able to learn about it and kind of dig deeper from what you all were saying about the show.
Well, again, thank you so much. I mean, gratitude for giving us the chance and for helping. I'm glad that we helped inform at least the way you might approach it as an actor. So, I mean, that all being said, can you describe the process of, number one, how you auditioned for the role, and then once you got it, what happened from there?
So the audition came in, and I quickly read over the sides, which again is just sort of a portion of the script, just with that character's involvement. And it was an earlier draft that Drew Lindo, the amazing. He wrote just an incredible episode, and I could tell just from what I was reading that this was something kind of special. It just had so many twists and turns within such a condensed kind of time period. Um, and so I read it over a couple of times and listened to you guys. I went back and was very fortunate because the show was on NBC. I was able to quickly watch some previous episodes again to kind of get up to speed with everything. Um, and then I just put myself down on tape and crossed my fingers and hoped for the best. And in fact, I'm in the room that I literally auditioned in. And it's weird because we have moved with COVID. Actors kind of moved into a situation where we were no longer going in and reading with the casting directors and meeting the directors and the producers. We're putting ourselves on tape and just hoping that we're in the zone, hoping that we're getting close to what they need, because that's the one component that you miss when you're self-taping is the casting director to kind of pull you aside and whisper in your ear and say, you know what, they've seen so many people today do it like this, try it like that. And so I just had to go with my gut instinct, and I tried, and I think it was a pretty quick turnaround, quite honestly. I think it was maybe a day. And then my agents called and said, they're interested. And then that kind of moved to they've put a pin in you, which is sort of mean they really, really like you, but they don't want to commit just yet. They don't want to pick out China patterns just yet. Um, and partly that I think comes from the fact that when they're shooting episodes, they don't want to book somebody if all of a sudden things need to get changed or they're having to shift things around. And so um, they kept a pin in me for a day or two. And then I got the official notice that I had booked the role, which was very exciting. And I've got to share, it was funny. Again, it was sort of an affirmation that, okay, I guess I got it right. I guess my instincts were right. I guess what Matt and Chris were saying on the podcast was right. So, okay, all right, let's go in and let's try it. And so they called me in over at Universal Studios to do a fitting for the wardrobe. And this was about a week before I was going to start filming, actually, to give the tailors enough time to adjust the wardrobe and everything. And that in and of itself was exciting because the costume designer had pulled me suits that were actually from the period. This wasn't something that they had just picked off the rack. This was truly something someone had worn this suit back in the 50s. And it was such a lovely thing to kind of put onto my body and to sort of absorb the echoes of it. Um, and so we went through the fitting. We tried lots of different looks for the doctor, and glasses as well that I wear in the episode. And so I was just finished and I was getting dressed, getting ready to just go back out in my car and wait for them to call and tell me what time my call time was in a couple of days. And one of the assistant wardrobe people came into the room and she had kind of a long face on. And she said, "The producers and director needs to see you." And I went, "Oh, okay. All
Is
right."
that so? As
And
an
so
actor, with your experience, is that like a red flag? Does your heart just stop or go up into your throat?
it kind of did stop just a little bit. It was kind of like, okay, I think there's always that imposter syndrome as an actor, in that, you're just, I could be in the job, in the middle of a job, opposite, Kerry Washington in a scene from Scandal or something, still waiting for somebody to tap me on the shoulder and go, "You know what? We met the other guy. We're so sorry. Please, you're welcome to stop off at craft services on your way out. But, thank you so much. We won't need your services." So I made the walk over in the offices there down this very long hallway that felt a lot longer than it probably is, because I honestly did not know what I was going to be expecting. And in the walk, I'm walking and thinking, okay, what is it they're going to tell me? They didn't like this, but I got by on the hair of my chinning chin chin, or maybe it was an accent that they were wanting to see if I could, be able to inhabit or whatever. And I turned the corner into the office, and there sat Drew and the episode's director Pamela Romanowski, who I know you guys are speaking to as well. And that both of them stood up, came across the room, and gave me huge bear hugs, just unsolicited, and said, "Thank you. You were our guy. We saw you, and within seconds, we knew you were our Dr. Donovan." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I kept waiting for the other shoe to fall, kind of a thing. And they're like, "That's it. We just wanted to tell you we can't wait to play." And I was like, "I can't wait to play. Thank you." And so I kind of, like the Grinch, my heart grew 10,000. I walked out of there just going, wow, that was really kind of special, that they're in the middle of prepping this episode and they wanted to take the time to say, "Hey, Cullen, attaboy, we loved what you did. We can't wait for you to come and play with us." And that's what we did. From the moment I got on set, that whole week was just, I just got invited into the sandbox and we just played.
That's terrific. Now, I know that you had a little bit more to do than most guest stars because there was a very physical part of your role. I want to get to that part. I know you know what I'm talking about. But Was it a surprise to you that Dr. Cullen turned out to be the bad guy? Did you know going in that you were going to be the Nazi in disguise?
The sides that I was originally given for the audition did have the turn.
Okay, cool.
Um, and so I knew what was coming. And the thing that was really kind of exciting about it was in that initial meeting with Drew and Pamela, they both said, you got it. You didn't telegraph. And I think that was the thing about the role is you really need to believe that he is just who he says he is.
Mm,
Because if you're winking at the audience too soon, they're sitting there waiting for Ben to catch up, so to speak.
right,
Like we
right.
already know it, why don't you know it, kind of a thing. And so it was kind of a it was a dance that we sort of did to make sure that I stayed as kind of small and I guess maybe meek as possible
Mm.
within the context of what my job there at Princeton was, so that I could be ready for that turn that hopefully no one, including Ben, and Hannah saw coming.
Yeah, it was a really neat twist in the episode. And the way that they played it out was so much fun because you got to do like an old fashioned swashbuckling sword fight, which was maybe the highlight of the episode. And I really want to know about that because I know, I mean, it looked like real swords on the wall at least. And then you guys are dancing around and a lot of physicality. You're chopping Raymond's cane in half. And I want to know how does something like that come together? I have to imagine that there's a mix of you guys doing it and stunt people doing it. And can you describe the blocking and how that scene came together?
When I saw that I was going to get to do a sword fight on screen, it was the little kid in me was just jumping up and down. Hell, the grown ass man was jumping up and down. I was so excited. I mean, that's why we do these things. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've jumped off furniture as a kid, pretending to be the swashbuckling bad guy, and here I was. It was my Indiana Jones moment, so to speak. It was really, really incredible. And so we knew that was coming, and Pamela did such an amazing job in the sense that we shot that scene for an entire day. That was our day. And they actually, after we wrapped the sword fight, they still had more things to shoot later on in the evening. But we were on that set shooting that from every angle possible,
Hmm.
with both Ray and I using the swords, and then they were able to work with us, and we choreographed the whole thing, as well as then having our stunt doubles step in. And I was just so incredibly encouraged by the fact that Chad Bennett, a wonderful stuntman, came in to double me, and we don't look that much different from one another. It was a perfect match, so to speak, but he knew how to handle a sword and make me really look good. So, we went through a whole sequence of that sword fight where the camera would be on me, and I was actually dueling with Ray's stunt double. And then there were times in which Ray was on screen and he was sword fighting with Chad. So as if Ray were to perhaps slip, he would hurt Chad and not me, which was, I guess, an economical thing to do to make sure you protect everybody, kind of a thing. But it was really great, and we everybody just it felt so organic because we just went through everything very melodically and very step by step, like you do, to make sure everyone is safe.
Hmm.
They were real swords that we were fighting with. It was a real cane. It may have had just a little bit of an indentation, but I truly had to hit it on its correct mark to be able to split it in two. And then, of course, there's the whole challenge with the gunplay, that Ray and I Ray
Yeah.
and I became very intimate very quickly, so to speak,
I bet.
in
I bet
watching
that
that
was
episode.
my next question because after the
Yeah.
sword fight, we had the gun. Oh no, it was the gun part was before the sword fight, and then once I think you lost the gun, you got
Right.
the sword.
Then we
Right,
went to the swords.
right. So I mean, my question is, with all of these, weapons on set, did you have to go through any kind of safety training beforehand? Did you do it the day of? I'm just curious to know the dynamic of that because I have to imagine everybody's so hyper focused on safety.
Incredibly hyper focused and justifiably so. Um, and that was the thing that made me feel so comfortable is, when we were working with the gun, the props master, the gunnery, everyone was, the armorer on the set was able to show us, okay, this is not a loaded gun. There are no
Mhm.
blanks in here. There is nothing. The chamber is completely, blocked. There is no way for anything. And so it had the weight, and it was because it was a real gun, they were able to get the close up. But then in any of the wide shots, I was holding on to a rubber gun, that
Yeah.
it would hurt if you threw it at somebody, but that was about it, you know. And then same with the swords. We worked first with dowels, just wooden dowels. And so throughout the day, when they were setting up various other shots within our scene, when they were angling on, certain devices or certain parts of my desk and stuff like that, Ray and I would be off on another part of the soundstage, just going through the motions of the fight so that we knew sort of muscle memory where each of us were going to be because we both recognize and Ray's been doing it on a regular basis now with some of the stuff that he has to do on the show, but we knew that inherently there was going to be an adrenaline.
Mhm.
Once Pamela called action, you can't help but just give it a little extra juice. So we needed to make sure that when we ramped up the speed and we're going at full speed, that we were just as safe as if when we had started with basically chopsticks, just sort of, tapping back and forth.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it came across very well. Whatever you guys did, it was all there on camera. And what I loved about that scene was that it turned from sort of like almost like a national treasure solved the mystery episode and pivoted into almost like an action pulp episode with the reveal of the Nazi. Now, when you had to approach that reveal, I mean, you did have the speech about being a good German or being a good citizen, but you never, gave up the love of the homeland, that kind of thing. Were you tempted to sneak in a German accent on that and like
Well,
really go over the top? How did they direct you on that? And did you have to go against some instincts that you had? Because it just seemed like you could really chew on this, you know?
sure. And I think that that was to, again, Pamela's credit, is that she said I was able to gnaw on the scenery, but I couldn't chew it, so to speak. And I think that it was a collective decision that even before I walked in, when I auditioned, I did not do it with an accent. I assumed that Dr. Donovan by this point would have, really tried to just sort of, be innocuous, so to speak,
Mhm.
and not stick out. And so I tried to kind of bury it. There are a couple lines where the German in me actually came out, just, listening to my grandfather and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily purposeful, but it may have snuck out here and there. But there were a couple of things in that we wanted to just, and again, this was Pamela and Drew's call, to kind of just thread the needle as best we could, and again make his as accessible and as much of a big misdirect at the beginning, because I think if my character had come in with a thick German accent, it may have been a tell for the audience.
Mm.
And that was the same thing that, um, I in the episode, there's a situation where you see me in my Nazi
Yes.
regalia. And what they had done is they'd taken a picture of me and superimposed my face onto a real SS officer. Um, and a lot of things, and Drew and I discussed this, and Pamela as well. A lot of those officers back in that day would have had that scar
Right.
on their face, which is sort of a badge of honor. And so there was a couple of days where they were deciding before I started to work of whether or not they were going to put the scar on me. But ultimately, again, they went in the favor of, you know what? The scar and a German accent is going to tip the audience off. So let's just keep Donovan as sort of middle America as we can to hopefully have it be that much more impactful when the character does reveal his Nazi roots.
I think it was a good play because you're right. It could have so easily, I guess, devolved into more of like a cliche. I think of, some of the characters in Raiders of the Lost Ark where, just chuckling under your breath, Dr. Jones. So I'm glad you guys played it the way you did. When you realized the character that you were going to play was a former Nazi, did you do any kind of background research into some of the people that were part of Operation Paperclip? Or was it Project Paperclip? I want to say Project because it's Project Quantum Leap, but I believe it was Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I didn't. Once I had booked the role, then I kind of rolled up my sleeves, past the audition, past the kind of stuff that I had done beforehand, and I wanted to find out more about that Operation Paperclip and how someone like my character could have just, gone unnoticed, so to speak. And it was fascinating. It really was disturbing and fascinating, quite honestly. The fact that some of these officers, high ranking officers in the Nazi regime, were literally being plucked out of prison and being put onto planes and sent to places like Princeton and given new identities and said, okay, here you go. You're going to start, developing or working with the space program or, building the infrastructure of our roads. And so I found two individuals that came from that period, and I was able to go back and look at their previous record. And it was quite honestly really, really chilling, of what they had done previously before become a part of this Operation Paperclip. And so, I had a lot of backstory, which was such an incredible gift because often you're given a character and, the actor is sort of left to their own devices to make up, anything that's not necessarily on the page. I had volumes. I had, page upon page of things that I was able to learn about my character or about individuals that were very reminiscent of who I was playing.
Yeah, that's a unique situation, I have to think, for most actors, like you said. And again, it just came through in subtle ways in the performance, especially after the turn. Just like I would have bought that you were a college professor in the 50s, maybe milk toasts, and maybe a bit misogynistic because you weren't going to publish any of Hannah's findings. But, when you made the turn to the Nazi, it was completely believable. So I don't know if that's a compliment, but.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, it was in the writing. I've got to say, it was in the writing with what Drew had crafted. It was such a strong script. And then to give credit where credit is due with Pamela, because we tried a lot of different things. I mean, again, folks have seen the episode at this point. I've got that exit line, right when I'm sort of holding to him there. I've disarmed him. And it's when he's just before he knocks me out, we played that a couple of different ways. And just we tried so many different ways to kind of have that be sort of a signature. And Pamela found it. She could hear it. And so and was such a treat is again, because it was such a supportive environment on that set that she came up and kind of just whispered in my ear and kind of gave me a little thing to think about and tweak. And I did it. And then I kind of heard, that's it. That's a wrap. And so I knew that we would have kept going, quite honestly, until I had gotten it right. And thankfully, with Pamela's help, we were able to kind of knock it out of the park, hopefully.
Well, that's awesome. And you just alluded to being on set. I mean, it just in more general terms, can you talk about what it was like to be on the set of the new Quantum? Because I know that second only to Scott Bakula and probably second to no one, we hear so many good things about Raymond Lee and in the entire cast in general, but just what a giving and generous star Raymond is and how he embraces the guest stars that come on. So, can you talk about working with Ray a little bit?
I would love to talk about Ray. What an incredible human. Wow. So unself possessed, just so grounded, so down to earth, such an actor's actor, just going out of his way. I mean, by the end of our first day, he knew my family's history, and was talking about, oh, and then your wife Rachel said this, right? And it was like, how is this possible? It was really amazing. But again, it starts from the top. I've talked about before with a company of actors that I work with on a regular basis. We always can kind of tell when we're going to a new set to be the guest of the week. You're going into somebody's home. You kind of wipe your feet at the door and hope that they give you a seat at the table. And but it's always a trickle down in the sense that if I get to where the trailers are parked and I'm greeted by a second or a PA who's very short with me and says, well, you need to get in there, get your wardrobe on, get over to hair and makeup kind of a thing. I know that there's probably tension coming from the soundstage that's, happening, and just one person's yelling at the next person, the next person. There was none of that on the Quantum Leap set. Again, I got greeted with open arms with from Pamela and Drew, and that was my big sign that, oh, this is going to be a great week. And it manifested it in every way. When I was working with the costume designer, that's what I mean. It wasn't as if I just walked in there and they had wardrobe for me. They wanted to discuss it. They wanted to say, well, what do you see, Dr.
Nice.
Donovan
Yeah.
wearing? So it was a real collaborative experience. And then getting onto set, everyone from again the PAs to the grips and the camera. I was very fortunate that a lot of the camera crew worked on a television series that I had worked on a couple of years ago, the Jason Kadam series, Pure Genius. So in that way, it was kind of like an old home week. But there were so many other people that I was meeting for the first time, and by the end of my 8 days on set, I had made family with these people. And I think that there's something about Ray that is just so disarming. It just kind of transcends. It kind of just, he's number one on the call sheet, and yet you would never know it because he's the first guy to help, move things if things need moved, even though that's not in his contract. He just is such an incredible team player that everyone is giving 150%. It truly is such a wonderful experience. And I think that the nature of the show, by the fact that depending upon the episode, the guest cast is really doing some of the heavy lifting, that it's a situation where we're embraced, and it's such a wonderful feeling. I was very fortunate a couple of years ago to work on Steven Spielberg's reboot of Amazing Stories. And it was, in essence, an anthology series.
Right.
So all of us that were working on that particular show, we were all the guest stars because there was no one from the previous episode. And it felt the same way on the Quantum Leap set, is that, okay, you're part of the family now, whether you like it or not. And it was such a great thing because, like I said, Chris, I've been in this business for over 30 years, and there have been times where I've walked onto set and I cannot wait for it to be over. And
Hmm.
I have spent time since wrapping Quantum Leap trying to figure out how could Dr. Donovan maybe leap again? How could we see him again? I mean, if they're doing it with Hannah, maybe he ends up in prison with me or something, because I just wanted more.
Yeah.
I literally was holding onto the furniture when they wrapped me because I didn't want to leave. It was a hard thing. It was a beautiful week.
Well, speaking of Hannah, you have one of the most unique distinctions in the second season of the new series. You got to work with Peter Godot and with Eliza Taylor. They play Tom and Hannah. So, can you talk a little bit about working with them, because you were all in the room together, and I know you're not allowed to look at Peter. So, did that like pose any challenges, or tell me about that dynamic?
It was cool. Both of them right off the bat were just again so incredibly gracious, and we just had great conversations. I mean, it almost got to the point where we were so in depth with whatever we were talking about and laughing about when we were sitting sort of off to the corner, that when they would call us to set, it'd be like, oh, we got to go work, because we were having such good time just all chatting. Um, no, but Peter was wonderful, and it was kind of fun for me because the filmmaker in me wanted to see how they were able to do this, and it was one of those situations where, we shot everything and then we would literally just have to freeze,
Right.
as if, my hands here, and they would say hold, and then Peter would walk onto set, and then they would roll things again with him standing there, and then they would yell freeze again, and then he would step away. So that was really kind of exciting because I knew that movie magic was happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it was wonderful working with Eliza. Um, she and I first met actually in the scene in which my character is being arrested and being taken away, and it was so charming. It was so great because we shot that, like, say, let's that was on a Friday, and it was so great because then when we were working together the following Monday, it was like, oh wow, seeing an old friend again. They were both just so ready to play, and we all felt just so incredibly fortunate to be doing this because it just felt special. It felt like we were working on something really special. Beyond just the show itself, the episode just felt elevated for some reason.
Well, you did have the good fortune of being in a terrific episode, and I was telling Matt on the podcast that I know part of our job here on the QLP is to maybe point out some flaws and to talk seriously about both strengths and weaknesses. But we both feel like this season just gets better and better and better. And I feel like this episode was a real high point for the season. So it must have been just a thrill to be able to be part of it. And we're talking a lot about quantum, but I mean, your resume is just staggering. And I don't know if you want to go into some of the other stuff you've done, or maybe some of the stuff you're working on currently. Like, where can fans of Quantum Leap see you now or see you next?
I'll probably be heading to the grocery store after this podcast. um, uh, I with the strike kind of coming out of both the writers and actors strike, there's not a whole lot of kind of can. I have two films that are sort of gestating right now that I think are going to be coming out at the beginning of this next year. I work in a film called The Bunker, opposite Tobin Bell, and that's really exciting. And On the other side of it, I'm currently recurring on a show on Amazon Freevee called Casa Grande. It's sort of an upstairs, downstairs, a little bit of Yellowstone, a little bit of the have and have nots. It's kind of a wonder. I get to be a cowboy, which is
Cool.
kind of cool. As a journeyman actor, that's the thing that's kind of exciting to be able to, play a Nazi one week and then a cowboy rancher the next is always fun. Um, During lockdown, um, because I wasn't able to step onto a set and act, I leaned heavily into my writing and directing to kind of honestly just feed my artistic soul. And I actually ended up writing and directing a feature length documentary called Billy Flanagan, the Happiest Man on Earth, which is now streaming on Amazon and Tubi and Apple. And it's about a gentleman who is the longest contracted performer in Walt Disney World history. Um, he started performing in 1982 at Walt Disney World. And to this day, I actually spoke to him earlier today, he is still performing 42 some odd years later, still doing the high kicks. He's sort of the quintessential Mr. Disney. Um, During lockdown, when Disney was forced to let go of 750 equity performers, Billy, for the first time in his life, quite frankly, was out of a job.
Hmm.
And didn't know what to do with himself. And he's quite an avid cyclist. And so he started cycling around Orlando, Florida, delivering little singing and dancing telegrams, socially distant kind of things to all of his friends that were also displaced and out of work. And then other folks in other parts of the country started to pick up on this and said, well, when am I going to get my little singing and dancing flanogram? And so Billy started crisscrossing the United States on his bike, delivering these little bundles of joy to people. And I saw the story on Good Morning America or one of those places, may have been the Today Show, and I I reached out to executive producer friend of mine and said, I think there's a little short film about this, feel good situation. We contacted Billy, we spoke to him, and after talking to Billy, we realized we had a feature film. So that was really nice. And then otherwise, artistically, before the writer's strike and the actor's strike, I was very fortunate that I picked up a shopping agreement as a writer for to develop a novel by amazing writer Ali Larkin. And develop it into a television series. And so I've been developing and producing it sort of behind the scenes with my producing partner, Monica Lacey. And now that the strikes are over, so to speak, we can start to take that out. And I also have a television movie that I'm going to be writing and directing on as well. Um, so trying to keep all of the things happening at the same time, I'm
It's
on
like,
Quantum Leap. How cool
how do
is
you
that?
how do you do it all? And you're not even mentioning the fact that you're an acclaimed playwright, and you wrote a play that was somewhat autobiographical, that was won some major awards, and got
Thank you.
lauded up and down. Do you care to talk about that?
Sure, of course. Again, it came out of, you know, the writing and the directing of the Billy Flanagan project came out of the fact that I needed to get that out of my system, so to speak. Because we were watching paint dry during those early days of lockdown and not knowing if the industry was going to come back, how long we would be washing our groceries for, that kind of a thing. And so it was a real release for me. um, Similarly, 27 years ago, my oldest son was born, and he happened to be born with Down syndrome. And it was not something that, quite honestly, my wife and I were expecting. It was a typical pregnancy. And when he was born, it was a definite shock to the system. Um, but in that first year of life with Gabriel, I learned to kind of get out of my own way, and get rid of any of the preconceived notions I might have had about someone with a cognitive disability, and really let him teach me how to be the father that I needed to be. And so the play that I ended up writing, called Afraid to Look Down, is really my recollection of that first year of life. It's a one man show about how I navigated things, from Gabriel's birth to all the way to when we celebrated his first birthday. And that play, it was such a wonderful gift that kind of kept on giving, because I think I did it for the right reasons, or I'd like to think I did it for the right reasons. I selfishly did it in the sense that I wrote it just because I needed to get all of these feelings out, the confusing feelings that I was having about being a father, about expectations. And then I started to travel with it across the country in various little places and theaters, in different parts of the country. And then I was here in Los Angeles, and I was doing it at the former HBO Workspace, in Hollywood. And I did it, and gentleman, who everyone I'm sure knows, John C. McGinley,
Sure.
actor from Platoon as well as Scrubs. He came to see the show one night, and he too is a father of a son with Down syndrome. And John came backstage after the show and said, "Wow, Cullen, you knocked it out of the park, and you said a lot of the things that I'm thinking and have thought over the years." And he said, "Are you familiar with the show Scrubs?" And this was at the height of Scrubs.
Right.
And I said, Well, of course I know Scrubs. Yes, it's a favorite. It's kind of must see TV for us around the house. We love Scrubs, and he said, "Would you like to be on the show?" I said, "I would. Of course, I'd like to be on the show." Chris, less than a week later, I was guesting on the show,
Wow.
um, and that role turned into a recurring role on Scrubs. And so, you never know where things are going to come from in this business. And the fact that at the very, very least, with the Quantum Leap episode, not only was I able to play and do what I love to do, I have walked out of there with friends, true friends in Ray and in Pamela and in Drew. And I look forward to the opportunity where we all get to play again because,
Hmm.
that's for me at the end of the day, that's what I want to do. I just want to keep playing with people that I enjoy working with.
Well, I'm keeping it since we're circling back to Quantum Leap. Are there any other aspects of the episode that we haven't discussed that you think we should highlight?
You know, I, my favorite parts are my parts. So that's sort of a given. But the episode, just in general, is just such a strong episode that, it's definitely one that I think people are going to be hopefully referring to and talking about for quite some time. No, I honestly think we covered. I will tell you this one thing that it was again sort of an actor's moment. I had that same feeling when I was sharing with you earlier how when the wardrobe department put me in period clothes, I was immediately kind of being able to transport myself. I felt like I was leaping. Um, when they put my character into the back of the 1950s police cruiser, I was sitting there in the back of this 1950s car, and my POV out of the back seat, all I could see were buildings that were doubling as Princeton, and then all of these background actors walking in front of me, all dressed in period clothes. And so it was as if I was just transported because there was nothing aneristic within my point of view. I didn't see the camera from where I was sitting. I literally was just enjoying, wow, this is what it would be like back in 1955. It was such a really kind of experience. And the last time I had experienced that was when I was on the set of Deadwood years ago, where I was playing a cowboy. And again, it was another situation where the camera could not be seen, and all I saw was horses and you know people in petticoats and all of that. And but that quantum leap experience, sitting back in that back of that car and just seeing 1955, is going to stay with me for a lot of years, I know.
That's amazing. That's so much fun. Probably something that you can only get on a show like Quantum Leap or Deadwood, just that immersive experience. So,
The one thing that I just think is extraordinary about Quantum Leap, and I don't, obviously your listeners get it, but I don't think the general public necessarily gets it. People who are not sort of, you know, huge fans of the show or have yet to discover it. These guys are making a pilot every week. I mean, for someone like yourself who's also been in the business, you have to understand that that is incredible. That all except for sort of home base in present day, whenever Ben is leaping, it's a completely new set, completely new characters, completely new wardrobes. And it's in essence like every week they are shooting a television pilot and then going, okay, now let's do another one because there's no starting over. They start from scratch every week. And it's just remarkable to me that they're able to do that so efficiently and have fun doing it. It really is, it's a remarkable thing.
yeah, I think it speaks to the talent of the producers and the crew and the cast just to be able to pick up and just pivot every week. It must be, if you're a producer, it must be wow, so much worry probably involved, but it just seems like they pull it off with aplomb every time. So
Every time.
yeah. So, I mean, you've been so generous with your time. Are there any parting words that you'd like to give to the leapers out there who are listening?
Just keep watching because the rest of this season, although things that were unfortunately truncated because of the writers and actors strike, we're in for some really great twists and turns. And I just feel so incredibly honored to have been a part of this second season in such a big way. And I really feel like, the legacy show for me is always going to be there, but this is a whole new chapter, and I really encourage people to discover it. Go back, watch the first season. Really, just watch this journey. We're all leapers, and we get to watch it through Ben's eyes.
Wonderful sentiment. And thank you, Cullen, so much for appearing with us on the Quantum Leap podcast.
Thank you.